Okay, let's go to the scriptures. Thank you so much. I will edit what I want to say, but I want to kind of take us into lunch. We have explored the concept of preparing a way for the Lord. We've heard different voices, different angles. We've spent time around the individual. And what does it mean to prepare myself, posture myself like one of them wise virgins, and ready myself with my flask full in anticipation of what God wants to do. My thesis on the first day, which I didn't really get to, was Daniel. And in 12 chapters, we see of 5 prophetic moments he had, only 5. And if you work that out, from the age of 15, approximately, he entered the court. He served 4 emperors. And at the age of 85, chapter 10 is his vision. But my point is that he, and this was influenced by David Pawson, the British theologian's thinking, was that he lived in a posture of readiness, and yet God seemingly only spoke to him 5 times. But in 2,500 other days, something like that, he was readying himself every morning, having a healthy breakfast, every morning, being on his knees before the Father, every morning going off to work, working for the government, hardly intoxicating, and coming home and push play, push repeat. And my thesis is that within charismania, we do tend to think we need a prophecy a day. He had 5, at least 5 recorded ones. But 5 was enough to keep him afloat in a posture of readiness. So when this happened, chapter 10 of Daniel happened, he was ready to encounter the angelic hosts and all that was happening in the supernatural realm. We then spent time talking about your team, and others fed into the idea, how can I ready the team? And how can I change my way of thinking? Get a bit of Dylan in there somewhere, Stu, you know what I mean? You got to get a bit of Dylan in every time we preach. Change my way of thinking. Who am I choosing to walk alongside me? I'm going to say this very carefully, because I think most leaders that I speak to groan because they chose faithful men. Faithfulness was the primo virtue. We do want faithful men and women, but that's not the primo virtue. There are other virtues that are more important for kingdom advancement and for biblical readiness for when he comes. And then we pull our hair out when we are facing great challenges that require incredibly wise leadership, pivoting on a dime to lead our churches into the next. Faithful men can often be the greatest hindrance to us living out the purposes of God. I can't tell you what are your high virtues for the leaders you need for your church. But the scripture is way bigger, broader, deeper, and wider than simply one driving idea. Do I love faithful men? I hope I am a faithful man. But I want to be faithful to Jesus more than anything else. I remember my sister became pregnant out of wedlock at 18. And her then boyfriend were incredibly angry and rebellious. We suggested they don't get married. But he basically, her then boyfriend, gave us the middle finger. And I won't mention all the expletives, but telling us to go to hell. They getting married. They don't care what we think. So then they came to me and said, listen, will you do the wedding? I'm like, what planet do you live on? You know? My dad came to see me. Chris, see, a faithful man would have done that wedding. But I'm faithful to God and his word first. And I said, I cannot pretend to bring together in holy matrimony something that God clearly is not blessing. 10 years later, a butchered, bludgeoned marriage with 3 kids who were blown out the water by the chaos of their home. God's looking for obedience above faithfulness. And I'm asking you, as I ask myself, reconsider what the leaders are that you need going forward, because they may not be the leaders you needed in the past. The world is not in the 90s. We're not living with 90s challenges anymore. We need men and women. And I read that text from Judges, and God appointed new leaders when the enemy came to the gate. And I think there's something prophetic in that. What I want to do in the probably, 35 minutes or so, is just talk a little bit about leading our community through change. And it's not a full and comprehensive talk. That's not the objective behind it. But let's see how we go. Numbers chapter 9. If you have your Bibles or you just want to listen or you have it on your weapon of mass destruction, turn to Numbers chapter 9, please. On the day of the tabernacle, the tent of the covenant law was set up. The cloud covered it. From evening till the morning, the cloud above the tabernacle looked like fire. That is how it continued to be. The cloud covered it, and at night it looked like fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Whenever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. That's like, Moses, we got this. But he keeps saying it. It's like, can't one or two verses suffice? At the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at his command, they encamped. As long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained in the camp. We got it. Moses, we've got it. Okay? And when the cloud remained over the tabernacle a long time, the Israelites obeyed the Lord's order and did not set out. Sometimes the cloud was over the tabernacle only a few days. At the Lord's command, they would encamp, and at the Lord's command, they would set out. Okay, we got it. We've got it. Sometimes the cloud stayed only from evening till morning, and then it lifted in the morning, and they set out. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud lifted, they set out. Whether the cloud stayed over the tabernacle for 2 days or a month or a year, the Israelites would remain in camp and not set out. But when it lifted, they set out. At the Lord's command, they encamped. At the Lord's command, they set out. It's like, come on, Moses. We got it. Like we're not deaf. They obeyed the Lord's order in order that with his command through Moses. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my kind of... I feel fragile about it because it's not a kind of a complete 5 steps to success kind of talk. But I want to push and probe just a little bit at the invitation. How do we prepare a people for change? Why did God the Holy Spirit probe and prod Moses to say this in every imaginable way? I think because we're looking for a space to be safe. I think we're always looking for an easy option. And if we are to adhere to the full weight of the text, we are actually called to build something incredibly more profound than that. Now, I don't know or mind whether you speak of vision for the alliterators, values, and ventures, or mission, DNA, and initiatives, or calling, culture, and I intentionally did not use a C there. What did I use? Practices. Now, what might appeal to you as we ready ourselves for whether God sends an awakening or a renewal or a revival or a visitation or a reformation, whatever he chooses to do, I want to argue that we have got to consider these components of healthy, strong church in the light of this conversation. Are we preparing our church for when he comes? Are we? My friend Evan Wickham, beautiful man, Jesus lover, his brother is a very famous songwriter, worship leader, Phil. But Evan leads a great church in San Diego. He's a worship leader, he's a frontline ideator. And he said this, speaking about culture creation, he said, unintentionally, we create culture 3 ways. Through the stories we tell, the habits we form, and the relationships we keep. That is the unintentional culture creation. I think it's brilliant. It's one of those things I wish I'd said. I'll say them again. Thanks, Louise. Informally or unintentionally, we create culture, which is this middle doodad here. He argues 3 ways. I'm sure he got it from somewhere else. but by the stories we believe or the stories we tell. Just think for a moment. In your church, whether you're preaching or you invite someone up, what is the story you are telling? Because that is a culture creation. If we only ever call people up who succeed, the culture we have in this church is the kingdom equals success. Hey, God, Tom, just tell us about your promotion and the increase you got. We hope you tithe on the increase. And everyone, But Paul, you got laid off this week, man. Just come and tell us. See, what we are doing is we are creating culture by the stories we tell and the stories we give airtime to and what's important in our church. And subconsciously, we are creating that narrative that people begin to believe and measure themselves by. The habits we form. What do we do regularly? What do we do consistently, both privately and publicly? Now, whether you have a table community, there are 12 people around your table, and that is your community right now, or you're a community that is large and significant and has a 30-year history. The habits we form, the things we give airtime to, is our culture creation. That's what matters in our church. That's what's important. That's where people will put their time and their effort and their money into. There's a charity that works in the city of Costa Mesa. Very, very wonderful. We got a number of our peeps on the staff there. And they really do a great work with homelessness and the rest. And but they'd been through a hard time. A number of them got sick and families and lost homes. And so I just said to Caton, who's in our community, I said, Caton, what we'll do is I'll bring our staff and we'll come and pray for your team. He said, great. So I said, where shall we meet you guys? And he said, well, we will meet you at Church X. So we arrive at this tiny space, half the size of this. And I walked in. Now, there's context to this, which I'll bring you attention to in a moment. I walk in, and they have spent, conservatively, tens of thousands. I want to say $100,000 on the building. Carpeting, lights, sound equipment, speakers, kids ministry. We are talking Newport Beach, California. We are talking about spending an incredible amount of money. And I stood in that room and I thought, this room is $100,000 worth. What is the story it's telling? What's the habit it's forming? And what are the relationships that matter? The authors you quote, the books you read, the references you make communicate an inordinate amount of culture creation. And guys and girls, if we are going to open our hearts to God's eventuality, can I be, just to try and communicate it a bit more clearly, if you only ever quote one author, well, John Piper says, Tim Keller says, John Piper. What are we saying to people? There's a very narrow thread of theology that we commit ourselves to culturally. And they are the ones that matter. If I dare mention N.T. Wright, oh my word, Bible Project, something comes. Because what we've done is we've created this very narrow world of knowledge access, and we communicate to our community, this is a train wreck if we step outside of that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the thing that has always been curious for me was a question I heard as a young church planter. When Jesus was on the lake shore, and the crowds came, and it said he got into one of the boats. What if Jesus doesn't get into your boat? Was the question asked. And I was furious because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. And my primal question is success. Exposing my ambitious heart. But here's the question to you. What if he comes outside of your theological strand? Will you dismiss it because it isn't agreeing with you or me? What if God comes in a way that we have not culturally prepared our community for, and we do them a disservice because he comes in stories and habits and practices or relationships that are different to ours? What if? We have to be so careful who we dismiss out of hand from the pulpit shredding them in a moment of irresponsibility. But what happens if God looks beyond their theological difference from you and decides to visit with them, and we are completely ill-equipped? Then we have to say why it's not a move of God, because it isn't the way we are. So it is absolutely, dear friends, imperative for us to understand that if we're going to be a people on the move, the culture we create is imperative to whether our people's hearts and hands are open to divine visitation or not. If we had time, I would ask you, and maybe it's a good little exercise, spontaneously, let me do it. Spontaneously, on your weapon of mass destruction or pen and paper, what are the cultures in your church? Give me 5 right now. Don't think, don't put up your website, don't lie and cheat. Just say the 5 that come to mind are these. Write them down. And especially if you are, no, everyone. Yeah, no, don't say them out loud. That'll take too long. I actually want everyone to write down. I used to be a school teacher. Can I be a little bossy? Do you mind? Write them down. This is for the finals. What are the 5 cultures in your community, intentionally or unintentionally, that you have written into your community? All right? Now, if we have to think long, it means that our cultures are unintentional but still real. So I'm going to throw a few random ones at you. If we're to create a people who are ready, what about a culture like immediate obedience? My sister and her husband used to run they worked for the Parks Board in South Africa, and so they ran a little kind of a fishing outlet in the northern part of Natal, KwaZulu-Natal, called Mapelan. And she had 2 little girls, and she used to say to them, when I speak, that's enough. And I used to think, Kath, they're little kids, come on. Shay? Well, you see, one day she walked out of one of the huts cleaning for the new guests to come in, and her 3-4-year-old toddler was standing over there, and between her and the toddler was a cobra. Stay. Okay. She created an environment and a culture that actually saved her little daughter's life in that moment. The cobra went down and disappeared into the bush. What about immediate obedience? Is that one of your cultures? Or is it we'd have to take 6 months to ready you for a switch or a change? At once, the disciples left everything to follow Jesus. At once. See, it was a value. It was one of the cultures. It was one of the stories Jesus told, habits he created, and relationships that he forged, that there is an at once and immediate obedience that is so necessary when he comes. What about this one? Everyone's gift matters. Now you see, if we believe that, think of your values a little bit like playing temp and bowling. And you know the little kids, they put the buffer zones, the buffer things in, because the kid rolls the ball down, and then it bounces this way, and then eventually hits it, and everyone goes, ooh. Our values do that to us. Our cultures, they allow the ball to bounce around and stay on course and take out the 10 pins at the end. So we all say we celebrate everyone's gifting, but by the stories we tell and by the habits we practice and by the relationships, we don't actually model that, do we? So I'm challenged by that because I actually love that theology. We call it the priesthood of all believers technically. It's kind of cooler language to say things like celebrate everyone's gifting or mobilize the many. But what if we actually meant it? What if we actually did it? So July the 6th, we will have a thing called Apprentice Sunday. An Apprentice Sunday in our community is when everything that happens is done by someone for the very first time. So from the greeter at the door, which we like giving away because it's not too much damage control. So the person who leads pre-gathering prayer, we normally have 30 or 40 people who come for pre-gathering prayer. It's a 30-minute prayer time. Someone's going to lead that for the very first time. Someone who will welcome everyone and story tell. I don't like announcements because no one listens to them. So why make announcements? But people listen to stories. So I need a storyteller who's going to tell 3 stories. We've got a whole bunch of guys camping this weekend. That's a story. Hey, don't forget to sign up for the men's camp. Oh. What's that? What's that? So embarrassing. Just tell a story. We're going early, we're going off-roading, and we're going to sit around the fire and drink some whiskeys and story tell. Don't forget the men's camp. We're going to sit around the fire, have some whiskeys and story tell. Which is more compelling to you? Someone's going to lead worship for the first time. Could it be a lemon? Absolutely. I preached a lemon 2 Sundays ago, like a sake lemon. I was so embarrassed that at the end we had communion and one of the elders came up, Jordan, and kind of gave a prophetic word. And I stood there thinking, I actually owe this church an apology. That was a sucky message. Prepared well, edited well, did a really bad job. I said, guys, I just want to say I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You took time to be here, and I preached this message really badly. So if I can preach a bad message, and more people came and thanked me for that message than do normally, you know. Oh, that's a true story. Normally, hey, Chris, yeah, what's up? See you this week, whatever. Now it's, oh, thank you. That was so amazing. What that was amazing was my apology, you know. Thank you for apologizing, you idiot. So the worship leader could have a lemon. But I say to them, as I do every time, I'm right here next to you. If you don't know what to do, I'm going to lean in quietly next to you and I'm going to say, move on to the next song. Well, let's sing that again. On the job coaching. And then someone's going to preach for the first time. Matty and Carl, a husband and wife, are going to preach for the very first time on July the 6th in our community on worship. See, we can't say this is our value, but we don't practice it. Because it's the stories we tell, the habits we form, and the practices we follow. Extravagant generosity. How many of you love that as a virtue? Well, can I take a few moments to tell you a story? When I first heard of Celebrate Generosity, I heard it from Matt Larson and his church in Anthem, which is Thousand Oaks north of LA, kind of the northernmost part of LA. Great guy, great church. They borrowed the idea from David Ferguson, who leads a mega church in Chicago. And this is the thesis behind the idea. That once a year on their birthday month, they prep the church for a month and they take an offering. But every dime and dollar of that offering goes to ministry beyond themselves. Every month. I mean, every year they do that. Our birthday month is kind of in the middle of the summer, so it's not a great time. So we decided this year, our first time ever, to take it in March. Now, can I give further context to it? And I am bragging on our congregation. I hope you don't mind. We've never taken an offering in 8 years. I felt God say, millennials don't trust old white guys who talk about money. That's just the true story. Welcome to Southern California. So we don't. Up until that point in time, I've never preached on money in 8 years. So we gave it a thumbs up. We're going to have a go. So to Meryl's point, we're going to take a week, take 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, take a month rather, and prep. I had Matt come down, because you see, remember we said, it's the stories we tell, the habits we form, and the relationships we enjoy. I said, Matt, come and tell us some stories. You've been doing this since the first year you planted. And I said, I need to know the numbers, how much money came in. With COVID as an aside, it just kept going. I think this year they raised something like $250,000 that was given away. So I preached the other Sundays. So now comes the first Sunday in March, and we're about to do this. Why? Because we have a value called generosity. So I preached in LA in the morning. I'm driving back about an hour and a quarter. And on the way back, the enemy is on my shoulder, and he is nonstop, yaga, yaga, yaga. Now, I'd asked the staff, gorgeous little Rachel, I said, Rachel, how much money are we going to raise? And with her delightful, gentle spirit, she says, Chris, I think about 12,000. I was kind of thinking to myself, I was hoping for something a bit north of that, you know. Kai, how much? Oh, 20, we're going to raise 20,000. Okay, that sounded a bit Aussie, 20,000. Sorry, Levi. And so then I went to the elders. I said, how much? And one guy said, 50,000. I said, okay. They said to me, what do you think? I said, I think a minimum of 50,000. Now, you must understand, we've got a small community. We've got about 130, 150 people in table communities. That's my measure of our wellness. Not Sundays. Sundays, you blow hot and cold. So on the way back, that Sunday morning, the enemy is in my ear. You are going to be so embarrassed today. You're going to have to get up in front of your church and embarrassingly tell them how little money was raised because you've never taken an offering. You know how embarrassing this is going to be. We also told them who we were going to give money to and what percentages before it all went down. So there's no squabbling later. And we got a team of an elder and 2 non-elders, part of that decision-making process, all the way down an hour. I arrive at the meeting and I am beat down. I do my best to preach a really good content-filled message. And what I said to Kai and Rach is when we finish the meeting, because she's sitting there and all the giving's online, we can see it as it unfolds. So I said, what we'll do over communion, give me the number and we'll throw it up on the screen. I am, honestly, to my embarrassment, I am too poop scared to find out what the number is. So I'm ready to close the meeting, and Kai comes to me and says, aren't we supposed to tell the people how much has come in? I felt like saying, shut up and go home, you know? So I said, all right, Kai, how much? He said, 73,000 has come in. I'm talking 20-somethings. So we're worshiping. Rachel hoots and holler from the back. We've just crossed 80,000. I am in an Ezra mode of weeping and rejoicing at the same time. Wait, she says, wait, there's more money coming in. We've just crossed 90. At this stage, Azrael, AJ, who's sitting at the back, we turns off all the sound gear and puts on celebration now. Come on. As everyone danced together, and when we crossed $100,000, the place went ballistic. 120 givers of 20-somethings who we are told aren't generous crossed it, and we ultimately got $113,000 that we were able to give away to your ministry and to your ministry. And the local ministries that we gave money to came in and received the check publicly. Each got about $11,000. Sex trafficking in Orange County, homeless ministry in Orange County, a ministry for literacy for immigrants, and the other one? Oh, Karen, Jesse's house. A house for women who have come out of domestic violence. Now, you see, folk, the stories we tell, the habits we form, and the relationships we create our culture. It doesn't happen with a one-off message where we're going to shift the culture. It's slowly and systematically, the stories we tell, the habits we form, and the relationships we create build out our culture. And if you want a culture of generosity, it's got to be seen that what exists beyond our doors is more important than what happens within our doors. I mean, I could carry on, but time is never a friend like this. And so my thesis, my front-end thesis, quickly, I've got one more, is please give careful attention to the culture you live in. And it does start with you. Honestly, Meryl and I swallowed when we thought, well, what's our contribution going to be? You know, and I didn't look into this. Do you know the largest single amount? I kind of thought, well, someone must have dropped 30 grand in. Don't know who has 30 grand in our church. But the highest number was a young girl, I heard later, who'd been pleading with God for a promotion and an increase because she wasn't making ends meet. A week before we took the offering, her boss called her in and said, we've decided to give you this promotion, and this is the increase in salary, and she felt God say, give it away. The largest increase, the largest gift was $8,900 from a young single girl who couldn't afford to live, but God spoke. That, ladies and gentlemen, was our mic drop moment. Secondly, you with me? I want you to go home and sit and marinate in what are the stories we tell, the habits we create, and the relationships we build, because that is what our culture becomes. Secondly, and forgive me for going a little academic here, but I think you'll see the value. In the 1960s, a book, a sociological book about this thick, which I've never read through, but was called The Diffusion of Innovation. And the conclusion the author, a sociologist, arrived at is he said in any given organization, there are fundamentally these groupings of people. 2.5%, he argued, are what we call innovators. 13.5% are early adopters. 34% are early and late adopters. So it is the innovators, it's let me get my language right, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. And that, they argue, after scientific study, is the remaining 16%. Now, my dear precious pastors, who do you listen to? The people who whinge and whine. How do we know? Numbers 11:4. And the rabble with them. The rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and saying, if only we have meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we've lost our appetite. All that we've got is manna from heaven. They never got fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, and onions, and garlic. Those are the good old days. We remember when. The Bible calls them the rabble. We call them the laggards. Those who are complaining about any semblance or sense of change. We want the good old days. Chapter 14 of Numbers says, that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. The laggards talk. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt. My gosh, if only we had died in good old Egypt, the good old days. In this wilderness, why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword, our wives and children to be taken as plunder? Wouldn't it be better for us if we go back to Egypt? We should choose a leader and go back. Have you heard that story? I've heard it. way too many times. Now, what I want to say here, dear friends, I know this is scientific and I know that it's sociologically true, but what we have to do in any sense of change is make sure that these are the voices we are listening to. Any study of the tipping point says that around 15%, when 15% of your congregation buy into this, the rest will. These are the observers. They don't remember that video that went viral on YouTube with a concert, and there was one guy dancing all weird, and everyone was like, oh, who is he? And they said pivotal to that moment was not the guy who was dancing all weird, but it's the second guy who joined him and started dancing all weird. Everyone who watched thought, maybe that's all right. See, maybe. And so the second person came and the third came, and then they rushed. Everyone else was dancing all wild because it wasn't the first person who got the dance. It's those who came and adopted it and created the tipping point. Now, I want to say out of our pastoral hearts, we spend way too much time with these people. I know that they're sheep of His fold. I know that they're made in His image and His likeness. But if we listen to them in disproportionate spaces, we will be paralyzed, we will be numbed into non-obedience, because they will make it sound. They are like, what is a rat with a megaphone? What does it say of the devil? What does it say? The enemy's like a roaring lion. I mean, there's more like a little mousey, like this, and the massive megaphone and everything. Oh, everyone's thinking this. No, 16% of grumpy people are thinking it. Those aren't. And I'm trying to say this because we have to guard our ear to who we are listening to. Because otherwise we will drown in those sorrows. Let me just make a few closing comments here. Oh, can I tell you about Emil Durkheim? Who knows who Emil Durkheim is? So Emil Durkheim was a sociologist, arguably the father of sociology in the turn of the century into early 1900s. And he went down to study the Aboriginals in Australia. Levi, this is a point just for you. And when he studied the Aboriginals, he came to this conclusion. He said they offer a collective effervescence. I just like that phrase. I think that is so amazing. A collective effervescence. And what he then wrote of that, he said that the collective effervescence is the intense energy and emotional excitement that people feel when, 1, they come together, 2, in a group, 3, around a shared purpose, and 4, around rituals and celebrations. What our job is in a culture and atmosphere of change is to create a collective effervescence. Give them a why, a shared purpose. This is why we're doing what we're doing. We're not doing it because it's been done. We're doing it with rampant expectation that God will meet with us and will transform lives and will catalyze and catapult us into a greater gospel adventure. Give them a why, not just a what. Get them to come together. The deconstruction mindset of the many is so counter the scripture. There is power, dear friends, coming together in a group around a shared purpose. I mean, I just looked this morning at dinner. We were sitting, a German, a Dutch woman, lady, person, a Brazilian, an Australian, a Cape Townian. They like a law unto themselves. London, who outside of Jesus comes together like that? But we create a collective effervescence. We find the shared purpose and we rally all of our energy and our togetherness and our ritual and what are we talking about? Our stories we tell, our habits we form, and the relationships we develop. So what must I do? I close with just a few final thoughts in leading my church into a culture of change. Firstly, is pray prophetically. And that's the prayer of uncertainty. Any true prophet lives with an enormous amount of humility because they know we see but through the glass dimly, 1 Corinthians 13 says. We're uncertain, it's not clear. And prophetic prayer is the prayer of the humble. God is nudging us, God is moving us along, and we will obey Him immediately. But we want everything clear, say the control freaks. Give us the 5 steps, give us the timeline. No. All that I have to offer you is a sense of why and the uncertainty of what it's going to take to get there. Secondly, find yourselves in the Bible story. Take your beautiful people. Remember we said we create habits by the stories we tell. Take a Bible story. I have been in Daniel because I felt Daniel was ours for we're about to move in the long story. Daniel's our story. Kai is preaching tomorrow night I said to him, Kai, you're the demons guy. You're up. Daniel chapter 10. Michael and the Prince of Persia are raging war. You're up, buddy. I'll see you next Sunday. I know that's very clever. Are you with me? Where are you as a community in a Bible story and connect yourselves into that? Thirdly, identify your 15% and work with them. I mentioned it the first day. Forgive me repeating it for those who weren't there. But the moment I began to feel the nudgings that God is moving us, change is imminent. We've moved 8 times in 8 years. I immediately put a WhatsApp group together of prophets, prophetic voices in our church. I said, I need you. Honestly, before I put a text out to the elders. We'd been in conversation, but I need to hear what they're hearing. There's a group of young guys I mentioned that I meet with on a Friday morning around the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. 20-year-old guys, I need you. You got to get in the trenches with me on this one. I need to feel your presence to the right and the left of me. Now, instantly, I've got 20 plus more people who are not elders wives, who are in the battle with me together. That is my 15%. Think about it, folks. In a church of 100, there are 2 of you who are innovators, and you might not even be one. 2. Sometimes we expect of people what they just aren't. Terry Fouché, one of the guys, many of you know him, he just said to me, Chris, I'm not a 2%er. I can't innovate. I don't know how to. But I tell you what I am. I'm a 13%er. You tell me what, and I'm in. I'm in, boots and all. But I'm not an innovator. I don't have an innovator's mindset. But I tell you what, Terry is as needed as I am. With the innovation, ideation, entrepreneurial essence of who I am, needs that first adopter to come alongside me and say, we got you. I'm the second dancer. This is not your second dancer. Hey, what are you guys doing dancing like that? It's so embarrassing. You see how awkward everyone feels because you're all doing this? Just go away. Just go away. I want the second person to come and dance with me. Thirdly, or whatever the number is, doesn't matter. Create some additional contact points. Don't propose, even muse change, and then withdraw from the people. When in the previous church, Southlands, when we were moving her from Walnut to Brea, it doesn't really matter. I just said to Meryl, I want to be available. So every Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I would take, forgive me, but a casket of Starbucks coffee. Hey, it was a long time ago, okay? And I would say, I'm in the park, I've got Starbucks, and I'm happy to meet with whoever. Come and hang with me. I needed extra contact points with people in the community who needed to know that I would be there to conversate with them no matter what their concern or question might be. Make additional contact points, especially for those of us who are innovators and ideators Tomorrow is way more of a reality to us than yesterday. It's just very difficult being us. I really mean that. I'm not being facetious. Tomorrow is way more real to me than yesterday. And I've got to drag myself out of tomorrow, and I have to plunk myself into today and work with you as you wrestle through your today conversations. I can't dismiss you. I can't be irritated by you. I can't just kind of roll my eyes. Here we go again. I have to posture myself right here with the 68%, and say, I'm right here with you. There are extra contact points to have as we conversate around the changes that are needed. I'm almost done. To the best of your ability, write down the Spirit-led changes that you anticipate. Why is the question everyone asks. I don't know if it's out of the garden. I asked the question prophetically the other day, just doodling in my journal. Why do we live with fear and anxiety about change? Could it be the garden? Could it be it was seeded into our forefathers, Adam and Eve, who were booted out of the garden from the sanity and safety, predictability and wonder of walking with Jesus, and everything was known and controlled, to everything being uncertain, unclear, and uncontrollable. Maybe seeded into us was that fear and angst of change. And so the gift we give is explaining why. Why? Whatever your decision, why? It's a question that's worthy an answer. Now just help me understand, why are we going from one big gathering every Sunday to house churches for 3, and why? I'm so glad you asked that question. You know the stories we tell, the habits we keep, and the relationships we have? Well, we just don't feel like everyone who's a gift to teach can teach, because there are 4 Sundays in a month and 4 of us teach, and we want to empower you. Now, it's a little awkward, a little embarrassing. The worship's not going to be as good. The kids' ministry is not going to be as great. But you know what? There is a higher virtue for us, and that higher virtue is to catalyze everyone to be essential to the kingdom advancing. That's why. You with me? Simple communication. Evan again gave us a great phrase that we repeat endlessly. Clarity is kindness. The first time I looked up over communion and saw 2 men holding hands breaking bread in our church, I realized we were in trouble. We had not preemptively done our homework on orthodoxy and orthopraxy to give those who wrestle with sexual identity clarity with where we stood. And so I asked one of the elders, who was a friend of the one guy, would you mind asking them not to hold hands as we wrestle with our position on an honest seeker journey? They were devastated. And it's my fault. I wasn't clear. Do we value them? Absolutely. Do we love them? Absolutely. Do they matter to Jesus? Absolutely. But we never offered them orthodoxy, and we never offered them orthopraxy. And they felt devastated. The community they felt safe in now had to say, this is not a safe place for you. See, clarity is kindness. And I think as we live in a more and more complicated world, we don't have to make pronouncements all the time. I use that purposefully because my heart breaks. Because they have been damaged by the church because of me. I wasn't clear. Therefore, I wasn't kind. It's time for lunch. In the light of everything I've said, and much is left unsaid, can I leave us with this, as Eddie stole it from my notes? I know he did. Lest we forget, and lest our preoccupation with the tipping point folk gains uppermost thinking in our mind, please never forget Luke 15, where Jesus said what? What did he say? All of you theological geniuses? Exactly. He said, if a man has 100 sheep and 99 remain in the paddock, feeding away, and one drifts away, head down, grazing, ends up outside of the paddock, vulnerable to the wolves. He said, surely the shepherd would go and leave the 99 healthy ones and go and find the one and then put them on his shoulders and bring him back. That's the good shepherd. For those who drift warrant our tender, loving care, especially in times of change. In their uncertainty and vulnerability, their head down, they could drift and lift their heads up and say, oh my, where are the rest? Number 2, the lost coin. A woman had 10 coins and she found 9 and lost 1. Wouldn't she do everything possible until she found the one who is stuck in between the cushions? Wouldn't she leave the 9 and forage around until she could find that one coin who is stuck? In times of change, there are those who is stuck in the old, stuck in what was, stuck in their ways. But Jesus said, don't forget about the ones who are stuck. And then lastly, the glamorous story we all love preaching because it preaches so well with our imagination. There was a certain man who had 2 sons. And the younger son came to him breaching every cultural protocol and asked for his 50% of the inheritance. And the father, being a super kind man, gave him the 50%. And he took the 50% and went to the big city and spent all he had on whoring and drinking and a life of perpetual unrepentant sin. And one day he woke up in the pig's pen and he said, even the servants get treated better than this. Now, my uncle had a farm in the Free State in South Africa. And I remember at 14 years old, sitting on his veranda, looking out over the maize fields. It was a large farm. And so whenever I tell the story, I can see Opa, I can see the father sitting on that patio every day at the setting of the sun, rocking on the chair, coffee or brandy in hand, wondering to himself as he mused, where's my boy? Where's he gone? What is he doing? I've heard whispers. His wife comes and sits next to him and she says, you sit here every afternoon. And he said, I know one afternoon I will sit here and the bus will stop over there. And my boy will get out and my boy will come home. People say to me, do you believe in eternal security? I think, I don't know what that is, but I do know what it means to be a son of the Most High. And I do know what it means to come home. And my imagination runs further because between my uncle's massive front patio to the gate was I know I ran it many times. There was this long dusty road. And I can imagine the bus stopping there, and off is not the strut of a successful, arrogant young man, but double-overed, bent-over man of high defeat, low emotion, and self-condemnation. And I can only imagine the father peeping through the mist as the farm seems to be. There's always like that misty haze, and he turns to and forgive me for thinking in Afrikaans here, but he turns to his wife. Oma, dink jy? Wat dink jy? Is dit ons seun? Do you think it's our boy? Oma looks, nah, nee, ek dink nie so nie. Ons seun was groot, he was big. He was sterk, he was strong. That's not our boy. Nee. Ek dink is ons seun. And he gets up off his rocking chair. Forgive me for my emotion and my tenderness, but it's a story that catches me every time as he looks through the mists and the haze and he thinks it could be my boy. It might be my boy. And the slow plod, a curious preoccupation is it becomes a soft jog to maybe it is. And then he realizes the bent over, buckled, beaten young man is actually his boy, and he starts running because I would. And he picks up his boy. And I'm sure his son's smelling beyond what you can describe, is saying, Dad, leave me. Dad, please leave me. Dad, please leave me. How could you possibly accept me back as I am? And the father, not compelled by the smell, the odor, the dirt, or the stench, holds him and kisses him cheek to cheek. It's my boy who's come home. Come on, I've got a new coat for you. I've got some shoes for you. I've got a lamb prepared for just this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, lest we forget and get so compelled by this that our heart forgets to break for this. There are bent over boys and girls, sons and daughters who are coming home. And I suspect we better have hearts open to receive them. Would you pray with me, please? Clarity is kindness. God, would you help us prepare our beautiful communities for what is to come? There's the technical, of course there is. There is the uncertainty, of course there is. There is the vulnerability, there is the desire, the hankering for, the thirst for. But in our haste, passion, and prophetic desire, let us never forget the lost sheep who's drifted, the lost coin who's stuck, and the lost son who's entrenched in their rebellious ways. Our hearts always open to them to come home. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Let's go.